Hello, my name is Cayman Wall. I'm going to be hosting a session today on how to calculate your business's carbon footprint. Um, I'm the head of economic and industry analysis in Fudge Ireland, and I and the team have been doing quite a work in this area with the speakers you're going to hear from today. The agenda that we'll be going through starts off with why does carbon footprinting matter and why it is a big deal for your business. We'll also be pointing you towards the Climate Toolkit for Business. This is an online tool prepared by the government, which helps you, first of all, to estimate your carbon footprint, but also then gives you a tailored action plan to reduce that footprint over time. This website and toolkit is getting a lot of attention at the moment because the temporary business energy support scheme, the requirements around that require those looking for funding under the scheme to complete a carbon footprinting exercise, but also then to take steps to reduce that footprint over time. This is a free online tool, so you're very much welcome and encouraged to use it. We also cover what to do next once you have your carbon footprint. Now, I'm going to introduce the speakers. First of all, we have Nigel Russell from EarthCheck. He's been in quite a bit of work in this space recently, along with Cameron Blatch from the Impact Cooperative. Both Cameron and Nigel have experience in this area, and we did a lot of work with them early in the summer when it came to using this toolkit. We piloted it with a sample of hotels who we got through our contact with the Irish Hotels Federation. So I'll pass over to Nigel then and see you for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Cayman.
All right, Nigel, it's all you.
Good. Great to be with everyone this morning. My task's really a short intro to about carbon footprinting before I hand over to my colleague Cam, who'll take you through the main business of the webinar, which is to talk you through the calculator itself. So first question in front of you is, what's the big deal with my carbon footprint? So as tourism businesses, we've been very used to talking about being profitable. We've been very used about being a good employer. We've been very used about delivering great experiences to consumers. It's now about what impact do we have as a business as well, and one way of measuring that is my carbon footprint. So that's why. Let's start with terminology. It's a technical area, lots of phrases being bandied around. If we're going to talk about carbon footprint, we need to know what we're talking about. So starting straightforward with the footprint, it's the amount of greenhouse gases produced to directly and indirectly support a person or a business's activities. It's usually measured in the equivalent tons of CO2, carbon dioxide, per year. You need to think of it as about everything that you do as a business, your travel, the energy you use, the supplies you use contribute to that carbon footprint. Fairly straightforward. One of those other phrases that are around there that causes a little bit of confusion is carbon neutral versus net zero. The truth is they're actually very similar terms, and as tourism businesses, feel free to use either. Think of them as about being a balance, the balancing act of the emissions that your business puts into the atmosphere balanced with those that you pull back out to be equal. The aim is to be as near as zero or neutral as possible. So you can use either, both mean very similar things, and it's all about balance. Third thing we've got down there at the bottom of the slide is decarbonisation. That's simply the business of taking out greenhouse gases and emissions from those processes that you do as a business. Next question really is, well, why is it important? We've got a few bullet points on the screen here that I'd like to talk to a little bit. The first one's really about policy. The international community and the national government has woken up to it's a seriously important thing worldwide. There's genuine international and national commitments. Ireland's got a national target of a 55% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. That's going to mean something for every single business. It's been discussed for about 10 to 15 years. To start with, it was about manufacturers, it was about primary extraction industries, it was about farming. It's now about service industries, so it's something real for your business. The national government has a commitment. Secondly, global warming is real. We're currently warming at 2.5 degrees. The agreement internationally is 1.5. There's something really ethical and important about that the world's heating up too quickly, so action's necessary. Number three, we talk about carbon, but carbon in the atmosphere, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. So what we actually see at the moment is the impacts of that are climate change, wetter, drier, colder, hotter, depending on which part of the world you're in, and more extreme conditions. But that, we talk about footprint, but the reality is what we touch and see is change in the climate and the atmosphere. And then tourism, Glasgow Declaration on Climate Change have committed to a 50% reduction in tourism emissions by 2030. Really quite challenging. I think when we look at tourism, I think we're quite a high risk sector in that it is visible. We travel for holidays. It's a sector of the economy. Nonetheless, we're out there. You fly, you drive, you take a ferry. You're seen to be doing things. So I think in the terms of tourism, it being visible, I think it's an important thing for the industry worldwide over the next 10 years, certainly. So two topics in terms of what's changing. Why do we need to look at this now? First one is the cost of doing business. And the second is very, very quickly is changing consumer demand, which is happening right now. So I'd like to share a little bit of information about both of these topics. Stating the obvious, you know what your energy bills are doing. They're going up left, right, and center. Fuel efficiency and being efficient as a business, extraordinarily important, and the rises that are happening, it's affecting the viability of every single business. In the context of today's conversation in the calculator, resource efficiency and minimizing your bills starts with understanding how much energy you use. That's something that the calculator can help with. It's a way of measuring that and then the impact of that has in terms of your carbon footprint. And then from that, once you're able to measure, you're able to take action to reduce those costs and reduce that energy. So stating the obvious, the costs of doing business are going up. The calculator is directly relevant to this in that we can start to actually measure what we're doing. A great example of this in action, Whatley Manor is a country house hotel in the southern parts of the Cotswolds. They've been measuring their water, energy waste and their emissions since 2019. The figures at the bottom on screen show you the impact that they're starting to make. A 73% reduction since 2019 in the scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions that they've been generating, over 20% reduction in potable water, 30% plus waste reduction per guest night. And the figure at the end, what are they doing? They're generating just over 28 kilograms of CO2 per guest night. I think this, I'll pause on that. Per guest night is quite an important way of measuring this. If you're a 100-bedroom hotel, fairly obviously, you'll generate more carbon emissions than a 2-bedroom B&B or a small tour guide. So I think that the ability to compare per guest or per guest night is quite important because that delivers you comparability. So look, Whatley Manor have done a great job. They're a real business. They're a family-owned business. And once you see, they've started to measure and then they've started to take action. So again, in the context of the calculator, the ability to measure is the very first part of this. And on an entirely different scale, the slide that's just coming up, IHCL is the Indian Hotels Group. They own brands like Vivanta and Taj. They're the subcontinent's biggest hotel group, over 180 hotels, over 20,000 rooms, 30,000 staff. That's the size of the accommodation sector of many small and medium-sized nations. So a seriously big company. And those figures, they've been measuring their water, energy, waste and emissions since 2008. The figures you're seeing are the impact that once they started to get those benchmarks about what they're doing, this is what they've achieved since. So huge numbers. If we just take the second number there, that they've reduced over 200 million kilograms of carbon. Now, if I've got my zeros correctly, that's 200,000 tons of carbon. Now, that's so very important. I think it shows that if you treat that company effectively as the hospitality industry of a small nation, it shows the impact that individual hotels and individual properties can actually make in doing that. So your action as individual businesses contribute to a big thing. So that figure is huge, 200 million kilos of carbon. So I think it's just a demonstration that even though this is a huge company, it's how everyone's actions working together can make a difference. And finally, changing consumer focus. So to state the obvious, consumer expectations are changing extraordinarily quickly on sustainability, the whole topic. That's particularly the case since carbon. I think there's two ways to look at it. I think visitors are now looking for a minimum standard, a certain level of credentials that you're needed to doing as a business. And then there's the consumers who are actively looking for really genuinely sustainable experiences for those businesses who can go a little bit deeper. So I think the important thing to say is, rather than relating to this calculator, this is the first stage in the sustainability journey. You're able to actually measure the impact that you have. What we're saying is that there's business out there. People are demanding different experiences and more sustainable experiences. The point that guest holiday time is precious is also quite important. Despite everything, people are taking a holiday and their precious time and their just precious disposable income for their reasons. They want to take a holiday. So I think this balancing being sustainable with still delivering a good experience. And at the end, I've sort of mentioned it before, we talk about carbon, but you can't really touch and feel that. When you look at broader sustainability, what visitors do see is they do see a great experience. They do see great landscapes and great environments. They see if it's not working properly. They see if the litter is there, or they see if it's a pristine place. They do feel how communities are genuinely welcoming them. So when we do talk about carbon, that's damned important. But equally, if you think about sustainability in a broader way, it's about what they touch and feel as well. So I think I'll just leave you with that thought before handing over to Cam. Cam.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. All right, so with that introduction, we're kind of going to get into the meat of this. And so Nigel kind of gave the picture of what we're trying to accomplish with figuring out what the carbon emissions are, how that plays a role in the broader discussion on reducing the impacts of climate change and goals of net zero. But that's a big job. And when you're looking at your own individual business, you're kind of saying, like, where's my part? What can I actually do? And so we're going to break that down today. And here's just a quick 4 steps of how you can go take it from step 1 all the way through to actually making an impact. And the first step is simple. It's just measurement. You really don't know how to lower emissions until you know what emissions are there. Where is your business, at risk of generating more emissions than, say, should be there? So measurement is the first step. Once you have an understanding of what emissions your business is generating, then you can take steps to decarbonize. Maybe your energy use is really high. That comes through in the measurement phase. Then we can take steps to address that in decarbonization. Moving on, we want to be taking care of the environment itself as well. And the nice thing about that, as Nigel says, that's a key consideration for guests, as well as the environment pulls carbon out of the atmosphere as well. So there's a dual benefit there. And finally, building up some infrastructure around supporting sustainability through collaboration in industry and finance. So today, we're really talking about measurement. That's what the calculator is for. And so we'll dive into the Irish government's toolkit for industries, which is the Climate Toolkit for Business. So as Cayman introduced us, he said that we took part in a pilot project earlier this year. And that was really fascinating for Nigel and I, because we got to walk through the steps of using the tool with live businesses in Ireland and kind of get their feedback. And one of the biggest questions we got was, where do I start? Sustainability is a big topic. It touches a lot of things across my business. Where do I start? We want to get to that point later on today. So after using the toolkit, there are benefits that pull out of that, and that includes giving you an action plan on what do I do to implement these things in my business. How to measure the impact? Well, the calculator is the tool to do that. It's a free resource online that any business in Ireland can use that gives you a very simplified version of measuring the impact your business has as it relates to carbon emissions. And what can I do to help? As we just said, there are steps you need to be taking, and the very first one is measurement. So that's what the calculator can help you do, is make you feel like you're taking part in this. And actually, the information put into the calculator does have a big impact on understanding the Irish tourism industry's contribution to the carbon footprint.
And when we got to the end of the conversation, nearly every time the first question was, how do I communicate what I'm doing with my guests? Because we talked at the beginning about the technical phrases. How do I use this information to build that into my experience? And then, very practically, how do I involve my staff? The chances are that if you've got a team of people, you're not doing sustainability or carbon measurement on your own. You're relying on your team. And I think during COVID and post-COVID, when we've had difficulty getting staff, that thing about involving stuff, and everyone knowing what they're doing was quite a challenge for the businesses as we talked to them. So those were just a few of the themes that we picked up as we went through testing the toolkit and the calculator to begin with.
Awesome, thank you, Nigel. All right, so now I just want to take you through the actual website itself. So really quickly, I'll pull that up. And so when you type in the URL, this is the landing page for the toolkit. It's pretty straightforward. You'll see the button Get Started, but you can scroll right down, and the first step is collecting information on your business. So everyone on the call today is going to be selecting hospitality and leisure. The size of how many employees your company has, we'll just throw in 25, and then it asks whether you own or lease the buildings of your business. And once you're there, you just click through, takes you to the next step. And here we'll see the first kind of data input, and that's asking for the energy. You can see there's 6 categories there. Just selecting whether you want to put in the units or the costs. Once we're on to that, then it's travel, asking your fleet as well as your flights. And then we get to waste. So are you producing products or delivering services? And then what are the kilograms produced of different types of waste of your business? And finally, it asks for water usage. So that's it. That's the whole calculator. And we're going to now walk through each one of those steps in a bit more detail to get you more comfortable with using it. So what do we want to make sure that you take away from using it today? Basically get an understanding of how the process works, understanding where the data sits within your organization so that you can easily access it, utilize the toolkit as seamlessly as possible, not take up a lot of your precious time doing this, because we all know that's the most precious resource in business, and really get you comfortable with how does that data translate into measuring your carbon footprint. The calculator makes it very easy, but as we said, that's the very first step, is measurement is critical. And finally, talk through some of the benefits of using the calculator itself, which is to deliver an action plan beyond just the measurement phase. So that's what we want you to be able to take away from the talk today. But first, before you ever sit down, you need to understand what data we're looking for. As we just went through those different URL pages, you could kind of see what data the calculator is asking for. The first thing you need to do is elect a representative in your business that has access to all that information. So it might not necessarily be right to have a frontline employee do this. The higher up the company you go, I know the less time you have on your hands to be dealing with this, but having someone that does have access to information that may be scattered across different departments of your business will make that go smoother, make it much less time consuming of an activity. Then we'll make sure that you understand we need information on the buildings, the employees, our energy use, our travel, our waste, and our water. Those are the categories critical to use the calculator. And when it's collecting this data, it's important to realize it's asking for 12 consecutive months of information. So when it says we need your annual, what are the last 12 months? And it doesn't necessarily have to be from today back 12 months, but just 12 consecutive months of your energy use, of your water use. That's how it collects an annual carbon footprint estimate. And then one thing I want to point out before we get started is paying close attention to the units. This can get a little tricky based on where the information is in your organization. You know, for waste, it asks for kilograms, not tons. For cubic meters of water, not liters. Making sure that you have the right units to put into the calculator as it requires that. And we'll point that out for each of those categories. So what are you looking at for time commitment? I'd say for someone who's never done anything like this for your business, give yourself about 2 hours to go out and hunt down that data. So it may be in different departments, in different systems. If you can bring that all into one place and make it easily accessible all at one time, that will make using the toolkit even easier. And then if this is your first go, give yourself about an hour to actually use the website tool itself. That's the worst case scenario. It should never be more than that. If this is something that your business is more familiar with, shouldn't take more than half an hour. This is something that can have a bit of a learning curve if this is your first go, but as you get more familiar with it, it does get easier over time, especially if you can set up systems within your business so that all of that information is centrally collected. It makes it very easy to access, makes it very easy to use the toolkit. So jumping into the calculator itself, as I said, it collects a little bit of information at the beginning just to get some context on what type of business you are. So everyone today should be choosing hospitality and leisure as your sector. When it says size, it's asking for the number of people working for your company. That's both your employees as well as any contractors you may use. So different businesses have different structures of how they staff their employment. Anyone that is working for the general operation of your business should count as an employee when calculating size. And finally, do you own the property? So do you own the physical assets of your organization, or are they leased? That gives a better context of what type of business is going to be inputting the data, which gives the calculator a better way to analyze it and give you that action plan at the end. So the first real raw data that goes in to generate your carbon footprint is your energy use. And this can, for a lot of businesses, be the most complex. And as you'll see, there's 6 different categories included in the calculator. Most businesses are going to be relying on electricity and natural gas, but there are different avenues of energy for different businesses. And so it tries to collect as much of that as possible. This is the area that I want to make very clear that units are important here. So for electricity and natural gas, you're talking about kilowatt hours. Hopefully that's how your bill is structured. For heating oil and LPG and heavy oil fuel, we're talking about liters. And then for coal, registering that in tons. Those are different units for different energy sources. It can get a little complicated, but the nice thing is you can just ignore all the individual energy units and just put in your cost if that's simpler or the only information you have access to. And there's no right or wrong of saying, hey, I have kilowatt hours for electricity, but I only have my cost for natural gas. Perfectly fine. The calculator can handle that. But just making sure that whatever data you do have, making sure it's input. If you don't have it, ignore it. That's perfectly fine. One thing that we did get a lot of questions on was wood burning. Currently, that's not captured in the calculator. Not to worry about. If that's something your business does, that may be something that the calculator brings on in the future, but don't worry about it presently. So now we move on to travel. And this can take this can manifest itself in 2 ways for your business. The first could be your fleet. So for a lot of tourism, tour guiding, you have vehicles that you use. So it does divide those up by petrol run vehicles versus diesel. Hopefully that's the way that your business charts that. If not, a best guess of saying we have 4 diesel vehicles and 2 petrol. Give it a ballpark estimate there, and you can divide that up by the cost. This is really trying to get you comfortable with the idea of measurement. As you get over time and get comfort level of using this, maybe you can set up systems within your business that you are dividing it, and we know exactly how many kilometers we're traveling by petrol vehicles versus diesel. But they have different emissions is the reason behind that, basically. And then does your business take any business-related flights? That's something that I know, coming out of COVID is probably not high in a lot of businesses' operation ledger, but moving forward, is that something your business is going to be doing? It measures those between short haul and long haul. And the way that you can distinguish that is short haul is anywhere within the UK or EU, and long haul is beyond the UK or EU. So any flights outside of that would count as long haul. And it is important to know when it's asked for number of flights, that includes a return flight is a single flight. So both legs away and home do count as a single flight there. So moving on, we've got materials, which is a fancy way of saying waste. So the first question is going to be material intensity, and that wants to know what type of business you run. Most of the people listening today are going to click services. The only reason you would not click that in the hospitality and leisure industry is if a majority of your revenue comes from actually selling physical goods. So if it's a gift shop, I could see that being you sell products, not services. Otherwise, accommodation, tour guiding, attractions, these are all services. And that's important because you'll have different types of waste streams based on whether your products or services. Then we want to break it down by what types of waste we're producing. So just the shorthand that they've applied to all Irish industries is your black bin, your green bin, and your brown bin. And to give that a little bit of clarity in case your business doesn't or your county doesn't measure waste in those different categories, black bin is for landfill, green bin is for recycle, and brown bin is for your food. If that's not how your business currently breaks it up, then just apply the types of waste streams that you do account. So that may just be landfill waste versus recycling. You may not have separate food, but that's what it's asking for, and all three of those are measured in kilograms. And then finally we have water. This is the last category of resources data that the calculator collects. It is pretty straightforward. In an annual year, how many cubic meters of water are you using? Hopefully that's the same measurement used on your invoices or your billing, and that's just a single number for the last 12 months. And that's it. That's where we collect all of the data to get us here, which is an estimate of your carbon footprint. And the nice thing about the calculator is it delivers it broken up by where your emissions sit within your organization based on the data you input. So this is just a randomly put in number of figures for a hypothetical business, but they have more than half of their emissions coming from their travel. Second is energy, and then waste and water. And it gives you kind of a pie chart to see roughly your percentages, as well as the individual breakdown of how many tons of CO2 are generated by your business for each category. And then down at the bottom there, you'll see this is your total estimated carbon footprint for the year. Here it's 20.5 tons of CO2. So that's a really nice way to understand where is my emissions coming from? I just put in all this data. I don't necessarily understand, what's good or bad about that. This gives you an understanding of like, okay, so my energy use, that's only about a quarter of my emissions. That's relatively okay. Travel though, over half, that's somewhere I need to focus my attention. Is there any way that I can reduce the emissions associated with the fleet or the flights that my business is taking? That's where we use the carbon footprint once you've input your data into the calculator. And then as I've said throughout the presentation, a really, really nice feature about the calculator, it doesn't just leave you hanging. Okay, here's my carbon footprint, now what? It gives you a dedicated action plan, which is actually built off of the inputs that you've entered into the calculator up to this point. So it breaks these down into 3 categories. If this is your first go, you're just starting to look at sustainability within your organization, focus on the get started. These are the first steps you can take to kind of make your organization a little bit more efficient, a little less reliant on high emissions activities. If you're well versed in sustainability and you're looking to kind of mature your operations to be more energy efficient, more resource efficient, then you look to the embed category of actions. These are ones that can start you to get into the implementation phase. And you can start to see sort of that next step beyond measurement, which is decarbonization, starting to reduce emissions. And then if it's something that you say, hey, we've been doing this for a number of years, we feel very confident about the sustainability of our business, you can look to the strategic action plan recommendations. And these are about looking forward. All right, we've got our foundations in place. Where do we go from here? And a really cool thing about each one of the recommendations, regardless of category, is there's little icons that tell you what are the benefits that this is going to have on, if I were to enact this recommendation, how will it benefit my organization? So these include, engaging your staff. This will have a very high impact on reducing emissions. This may be an efficiency play. It may reduce your costs by improving efficiency of your operations. Supports are building relations, so it can bring extra resources to your business, and then it's broken up by the different types of resource use. So this will address your energy or your travel or your waste or your water. So it's very informative, and it's not really a concrete guideline, but it is a source of information and ideas when you may find yourself asking what's next. And on that note, where do we go from here? All right, I've found the data, I've used the toolkit, I've got my action plan. Where do we go from here? We really want you to take away from this webinar today that there are so many benefits that come from using this calculator. The very first being, for a lot of businesses, this is their first instance of taking a clear picture of what their resource use is. When I get an invoice for my waste, I pay it, and that's it, it's done, it's taken care of. Well, are you looking at that over time? Is your waste use going up? Are you spending more and more on that area? as Nigel said, energy is kind of an easy one to pay attention to, but not all the different resources of your business are always clear, especially depending on different, subsectors of the tourism industry. When you have the clearer picture of your resource use, you can actually start to focus on maximizing your cost savings. So you can see, hey, we're going up in these categories. Where can we focus our efforts to invest in energy or efficiency of energy, water, waste, so that we're actually lowering our costs by improving those efficiencies? The calculator is a great tool to get a visualization of that, as well as a little bit more quantitative measurement. The benefit to this on the broader Irish tourism industry is that as more data is collected in the calculator, we can get a better picture of what is the average carbon footprint of an Irish accommodation, of an Irish attraction, of an Irish, tour operation. All of these things can be developed into giving better pictures over time of what is the, expectation of my business by developing benchmarks. So, if all these different accommodations are inputting this information, as Nigel said, we get a little bit of understanding of the, not per guest night, but we'll see the size of the business, how many employees they have. It gives us a better understanding of where should we be benchmarking ourselves. Are we above average? Are we right smack dab in the middle? Or do we find ourselves needing to find areas to improvement? That's how this information plays out over time to bring even more benefits back to your business. And then finally, the action plans. And this should be some of the best takeaways from using the calculator for each individual business is, okay, I've got my carbon footprint. Maybe I'm not ready to act on that at the moment, but I also have, real life bills and operational costs right now, and my energy, my water, my waste, my travel. The action plan gives you a set of resources and really concrete tools to apply to those different areas so that you can just take this and run with it. And then as Cayman said, it doesn't hurt that there's a tax back scheme that's directly linked with your participation and use of the calculator and the action plans. So that's where we're seeing, the calculator go in the future as it'll be refined over time through your use. All of these things can play back to benefit your business. So now I want to invite my fellow presenters back to the screen for a little bit of Q&A.
Thank you very much. We've had a good few questions coming in, so I'll go to the first one there, which is about the Temporary Business Energy Support Scheme, as you just referenced at the end there, Cameron. Government doesn't mandate you to use this toolkit, but it is probably the one that we would encourage you to use. It is free, it's highly credible, and it's the only one that we know of that gives you a very strong action plan with all those points that Cameron finished on. So when you're filling in the application form for that scheme, you have to tick, right now it's self-declaration, so you declare that you have completed the exercise and you're following up with the action plan. We expect that there will be an audit at the back end of that just to cover off compliance, basically. Now, there's another question in there as well. Perhaps it's one for Nigel around scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, thanks, Cayman. So within some of those, back to some of those technical phrases, within a carbon footprint, we talk about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So very, very quickly, scope 1 refers to the direct emissions of the activities of your business. So think about the heating you use to run your boiler, the electricity that you power the lights with, the direct stuff in your business. Scope 2 is indirect emissions from the electricity you use. So scope 1 and 2 are very much related to your business. Scope 3 is the tricky one. Scope 3 is what is the impact of everything else. It can be things like you traveling for business. It can be the impact of the goods and services that you buy. So scope 3 is really very challenging. I think for the sake of this toolkit and where you start with scope 1 and 2. I think that, and we go from there. Think of scope 1 and 2 as the direct things that you own as your business. Scope 3 is the impact of everything else that relates to your business and the goods and services that you use.
Okay, there's a question here from the event side. So if we run an event, which is people traveling to Ireland and staying for a number of days, can the toolkit handle that? So who would like to take that one?
Well, I'll start, and Cam, you perhaps chip in on that one. So look, the toolkit's really designed for an individual business. As you saw Cam going through it, is about inputting data, water, energy, waste, and emissions related to your business. So look, this is a really good question. If you're a tour operator who's running multi-night tours involving entertainment, accommodation, everything, one of those things, or you're a travel agent, that type of business, the truth is the emissions are all happening in stuff elsewhere. So the basic answer is this toolkit is designed for individual businesses. In your case, number one, you would need the partnership of the businesses that you're sending your guests to. So if you sent them to 2 hotels and an attraction, the only way that you're going to be able to tell the footprint of that experience is by working with those partner businesses. So I think it's quite important, because I think it'll be very soon that you'll see in advertising, not only are you advertising price, quality, experience, I can see a time in not too distant future that the carbon footprint of this trip is X. So I think it's a very good question. This toolkit can only deal with one business at a time, but a really good one, and I think it's a more tailored task to actually do that. Cam, anything to add to that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's really right now built up for an annual carbon footprint estimate for an entire organization. So really, it's not designed to be able to pull out, say, an event from that. As Nigel said, each individual business that's taking part in that would just pull out their chunk into their annual carbon footprint. So it wouldn't be able to be kind of segmented apart from the overall organization. But there are tools out there that do exist for events. It's not something necessarily that I would recommend for the faint of heart. It is a very technical thing to do to measure the carbon footprint of an event. Mostly you're going to be looking at consultants to come in and experts on carbon accounting to be able to do that. But love the ambition. I'd love to see more of that spread across the industry. As Nigel said, I think there's demand from the customer side to be able to say, hey, especially when you hear these things and say, oh, this is a carbon neutral event, I'd like to see a lot more verification behind that. So I think that's where the industry is moving, and we'll need some tools to develop to make that easier to apply across smaller events.
Just to form out the next question, it's probably a case too of not letting the good get in the way of the perfect, because the perfect get in the way of the good. This toolkit is very good. It's not perfect for every application, but it certainly is a very good place to get started. There's another question here coming in that relates to somebody having part-time and seasonal staff, and how do they deal with that? The suggestion that I would have for you there is to work out the hours that those people work, and then you can round that up to the nearest full-time equivalent on the basis of, say, 8 hours a day over 220 days a year. There's a mixed kind of business question here for an attraction with an accommodation, a gift shop, a cafe, and other elements rolled into the business. What would you suggest that they do, chaps?
Tourism businesses aren't simple, are they? We all have multiple components. Look, for the sake of the toolkit, I would simply start with the biggest component of the business. If the hotel or the guest house is the biggest component of what you offer, that's where most resources will be used. So, the toolkit and the calculator is in the business of trying to estimate the impact of your total energy, water, and waste usage. Start with the biggest bit, and then as you start to answer those questions, those different components, you'll record the information as you go along. So I think we simplify it there, and start with the biggest bit of the biggest or the most. If you had to describe your business in one word, and you said hotel, that's the one.
The only thing I would add to that is the only where in the calculator it currently asks the difference between whether you're, say, a gift shop and your business is derived from selling products versus a cafe, which is more about of a service, is in the waste department. So as Nigel said, what is the maximum 50 plus 1% of your revenue derived from? Is it from the cafe and the attraction, or is it more from the products sold at the gift shop? Just input that into the material page on the calculator. Other than that, when you've selected hospitality and leisure as your industry, you're already pre-categorized correctly. So it shouldn't have that large of an impact on your overall estimate of your carbon footprint.
There's a question. Sorry, will I go on, or okay?
It was one extra came in, but one of the things we're working on at the moment to improve the toolkit further is to add some benchmark information to it. So in other words, the ability to compare your business with similar businesses. So if you're a single type of business, if you're a tour guide or you're a coach operator, it's a straight comparison. You're comparing with similar types of businesses. I think the question from from that person, it becomes a little bit more complicated then of picking the best comparison for you. But I think it's just something to say that we're working on is to add benchmarks that when you get your footprint at the end of the calculator, what does it mean? We'll be able to provide you with the benchmark so you can have a bit of context for it. But I think it's something else to think about if you're a business with multiple parts as well.
And related to that one, there's a question from a boat tour business. They're saying they don't have bills for the business as is all combined with the home energy and the other home bills. What can they do about that? I think they can still use the calculator. What they can do is just, for example, for a typical household or family of their size, they can get data from, say, other websites as to the normal energy usage for a typical family or household of a given size, and subtract that from what they do have. And that surplus over and above the norm is probably what they should be putting into the calculator. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Nigel?
I suppose the other thing I would then say then is as a business where the main energy you're actually using is in your transport. So it could be a coach, it could be a three-wheeled trike of some type. You've got a boat. The main energy you're actually using and delivering your business is in the diesel or the petrol that you're using in that. So that will be picked up in the tool as well. I think Cam, in the one of those stages that you went through, you would pick that bit of it up. Part of your operations is your office, which is part of your house. As Cayman said, you would do, and the best way to do that was an estimate of typical energy usage is a part of your household impact.
The only thing that's correct. That's exactly right. The only thing I'd add is just be consistent. Once you've set up here's how we're differentiating from our personal use from the business, use that exact same approach month after month after month. That's the way to make sure you can at least get an accuracy via consistency.
There's a question here, maybe it's more of a statement, I'm not sure. Since we invite people to travel to our destination, are we not supposed to calculate the impact of their traveling? I think that was back to your scope comment at the start there, Nigel. And you can only control what you can control.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's fair comment. I think the visitors on a complete journey will have impacts on it each individual stage, their travel, their accommodation, their entertainment, going to attractions, and each of those things will have an impact. But I think where this toolkit and the calculator sits is, let's get our business in order at home first, measure the impact of what we do. I think there'll be other developments coming along that help with that journey, perhaps. I think the option there is you can look at things like personal carbon calculators as visitors, where you can actually measure the complete impact of your stay. But I think for the sake of this toolkit, I think it's starting with your core business.
There's a couple of questions there around offsetting and getting into another space there. It's around the claims around a business has, say, a sustainability certification, and there's a worry around greenwashing. What's probably going to happen there, and we're not there yet, but I can certainly look at Switzerland where they have, say, a national scheme. It's not a national scheme, and that the government isn't validating a business's sustainability credentials, but what it is doing is validating the credibility of the schemes that are offering those. That's probably something that could be considered. I think you've done some work in this space, have you, Nigel?
Yeah, look, I think in direct answer to the question, this is a self-completion toolkit. You're using it for business reasons, and I think we'd encourage you to be honest in doing that. But is this toolkit third-party verified or audited? No, it's not. So I think this is a planning tool that you can use to understand the impact of your business. You're right to ask the question. If you were posed a question by the media or by a guest, tell me this is true. I think for that you need to use a different tool. So you're probably looking at a certification scheme that's got third-party auditing or verification. But this is the starting point. I think about you using it as that planning tool. It relates a little bit to one of those questions we posed earlier in how you communicate all of this to your consumers. And a very good point you're raising, that if you make a point, you need to be able to substantiate or prove that point. So I think there's care needs to be taken in how you use my carbon footprint is X in your promotional materials or whatever. So I think but to start with, the toolkit, it relies on honesty.
And there is a piece, and I'll mention at the end, around the resources that Fáilte Ireland have provided, which helps you to communicate your plan. It's also a very good point you made there around the third-party validation and auditing of any schemes that do claim and offer to be bona fide. There's a question here around so water coming from a borehole. How do you calculate the energy for extraction? Well, I think there's two things there. Well, the energy from whoever provides your gas, electricity is one place to look for the data on that. And you can also look at Irish Water or your local authority. One or the other will be able to give you benchmarks for typical water usage for typical businesses, and you can go benchmark yourself against a comparator if you think there is a comparable business that you could look at out there. The question here: lots of businesses have no or low, volume or usage in Q1 last year because of COVID restrictions. What would they do when they're looking to benchmark, given that the tool asks for 12 months of data?
For that one, I would just say, start here moving forward. If you have a couple months, back, let's say when you're going back 12 months, the first 3 months just don't represent business as usual, that's fine. You're going to continue to get closer and closer to normal as we move forward. And so as you continue to use the calculator, if you do use it month after month and you are able to track that over time, it'll start to normalize. You don't have to get it 100% right the very first time. A lot of this is the activity of going through the process of collecting the data, understanding where the emissions sit through your energy, your travel, your waste, your water, worrying about whether one data point is not up to snuff is not going to kill the estimate, and certainly not going to be something that you'll carry as a burden moving forward. It'll clear up over time.
And if you're a long-standing business, perhaps you could look at Q1 data from 2019 if that information is available. But I think starting from here, again, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. The question just coming in there around somebody who's a tenant and they can't get access to some of their statements because presumably the landlord gets it. So in this case, there's 3 meters might be required for the premises rather than just one. What you could do there, for example, is get the total data divided in 3 if the premises are of equal size, or perhaps adjusted on a square footage basis as best you can to pro rata out the total for the premises into an appropriate size. Is that a fair suggestion, Cameron?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a very common thing where there is tenancy. It's why one of the very first questions is, do you own the premises? Because if you don't, it's very understood that it could be difficult to get that sub-metered. Hopefully moving forward, there are a lot better and cheaper technologies to do that sub-metering moving forward. I think there's going to be a lot of schemes rolled out because energy measurement is only going to become more and more important. That'll become easier to access, but the recommendation that Cayman gave for using a per square meter approach or subdividing the bill is great. I'll just rehash what I said earlier. Be consistent. If you do it once, continue it on there over time as well.
I think we're coming to the end of the questions, but an awful lot of what we have said kind of here we'll be kind of sharing when we write up the Q&As at the end, so you can have a copy of that. Some of the answers to the questions as well, we're actually referencing and name checking the Fáilte Ireland Climate Action page on the website around how to calculate your carbon footprint, the action plan that follows through, but also then tell your story and your climate action story and the good work that you and your business are doing. Because what we have found, and I think you did it at the pilot stage as well, an awful lot of people are doing very good work, but they're not telling their story for fear of being accused of greenwashing or being unsure how to take that forward. So on that comment, I think we're at the back end of the Q&A session right now. So before I go to close, I do want to call out and reference the Fáilte Ireland webpage. You can see it on screen there. Please do have a look at that, and we'll share some links as well at the end. Just remains for me to ask you, the audience, to give us your feedback. A poll will be coming on screen now. It's always good to get feedback as to where you think improvements could be made. We do take these things on board. I'd also like to thank Nigel and Cameron for their time today, and yours as well. Thank you very much. Take care now.
Thank you.
Thank you.